Tornadoes may just be the most fascinating natural event on this planet. I mean, honestly, it's a cone that descends from an anvil with the sole intent of feasting on your personal residence without fear of legal recourse. These condensation snakes drop out of the sky, do a dance, and then vandalize anything from millions of dollars of cropland to a 723-foot tall skyscraper to simply a gopher's mouth, and then just vanish. It's difficult to wrap your head around something that powerful, something so energetic, something so large, simply dissolving like ink on a soiled piece of paper. But just how large exactly? I mean, we throw around ideas of high-based trunks and mile-wide wedges, but just what does a mile-wide wedge look like? Well, this, sure, but what exactly is this? Just what is the scale of tornadoes? This is the May 22nd, 1981 Cordell, Oklahoma tornado, seen here from a National Severe Storms Laboratory group at ground level. A relatively high-based F2 with a smooth and pronounced condensation funnel, it's a personal favorite of mine and a good benchmark for scale. So just how do we measure it? Well, there are a few metrics for tornadic size. The most prevalent of these is that of path width, or how far out from the vortex's center did tornadic winds circulate. Although not necessarily correlated with intensity, path width, as well as path length, rounds out the tornadic event parameters along with damage done and estimated wind speed as categorized by the Fujita, now enhanced Fujita scale, and semi-official Pearson scale. Finding these parameters for historical tornadoes seems like a daunting task, yet is surprisingly easy as mounds of data have been carefully archived by a number of databases such as Tornado Archive, Thomas Gratzulis's Tornado Project, and the NOAA Storm Event Database. Pulling from any one of these, and we can find that Cordell's maximum width was roughly 600 feet, or a little more than the height of the Washington Monument. Now, it should be noted that the profile of a tornado's base is usually not a perfect circle, and the center of the vortex can shift around within the base depending on the airflow conditions. However, for the purpose of simplicity in this comparison, circles with corresponding diameters will be used to represent tornadic width. Despite this impressive width, at 200 yards, Cordell actually sits below the average tornadic diameter of 328 yards. Around the 300 mark sits a sea of obscure tornadoes, not necessarily as unknown as the 10-yard wide F0 that knocked down Grandma Edna's favorite tree in southern Missouri back in 1970 whatever, but certainly overshadowed by their larger cousins. That being said, the dead average group isn't without its team captains. Both the 1990 Albion, Illinois F4 and 2010 Campo, Colorado EF2 had widths of roughly 300 yards, the latter being arguably one of the most photogenic tornadoes in recent history. What makes Campo so compelling is due to the second and less commonly scrutinized metric of tornadic size: height. Campo is tall. Really tall. From cloud base to ground, the funnel pushed close to 1.1 miles in height. For reference, this is about the height of the original World Trade Center, stacked on top of each other. On top of the Sears Tower. all balancing on top of the Chrysler Building. Or, to simplify, a little more than twice the height of the Burj Khalifa. So, how does it compare to other tornadoes? How does one go about measuring a tornado top to bottom? Well, I could go through the tedious process of correlating maximum path width to photos taken at the precise time and then using the twister's base as a unit of measurement to then find the height and yada yada yada. However, this isn't the most precise. It's often difficult to determine where exactly a tornado achieved its maximum width, and then of course you have tornadoes that were not photographed. Plus, it's enough to drive even the most seasoned tornado enthusiasts absolutely bonkers. Trust me, I know. Luckily for us, there is a second option. The lifting condensation level, or LCL, is an atmospheric parameter obtained from the data collected by radiosondes, the things attached to weather balloons. You know, the little boxes that pretty much have "This is not a bomb, don't freak out" written in big bold letters so your neighbor doesn't call in the local squad when it lands in his bird bath. LCL is the point at which a rising parcel of air's relative humidity reaches 100%, and if passed, said air parcel's water vapor content will begin to condense. Essentially, it's just the bottom of the clouds. Really no need to overthink it. Great. Wonderful. Where do we get LCL? Well, LCL is most often seen as a product on meteorological skew-T charts, the charts that are produced by radiosonde data. And lucky for us, just as with tornado data, there is an extensive archive of the skew-Ts produced by pretty much every scheduled National Weather Service weather balloon launch since 1946. Why something so niche is so readily available to the public is beyond me, but hey, it works in our favor. Taking a look at the balloon launch from central Oklahoma on the 22nd of May 1981, and we see that Cordell's height sat somewhere in the realm of 1,270 meters, or 4,170 feet. Still pretty tall, about the same height as Mount St. Helens when measuring from base to peak, and very comparable to the host of other photogenic, high-base trunks and cones like Spearman, Texas 1990, or Dodge City, Kansas 2016. Nevertheless, this is still substantially shorter than Campo. Even large stovepipes like the 1979 Seymour and 1995 Dimmitt Texas tornadoes fail to match the raw altitude of the famed Colorado trunk. A similar trunk, the 1978 Osnabrück, North Dakota tornado, best known for its stunning life cycle photos captured by photographer Eddie Otto, comes close at about 1.02 miles tall. Although it too falls short. When it comes to height, Campo, it seems, is pretty untouchable, and no tornado I've come across so far has been able to surpass it. Well, almost. So then, what about the opposite end of the spectrum? What are some comically short tornadoes? Well, this is a bit trickier to determine, as, again, path width so often overshadows that of height. So, small tornado records are usually awarded to those that are skinny rather than short.
I mean, they all love that big tree, right? They're all proud of that one. They hate the crap out of the little one next to it.
Plus, tornadoes shorter than 500 meters are less likely to be nice, smooth, photogenic cones, and are more likely to look like this.
Look at this sorry, miserable, squashed thing.
It's as if the mesocyclone said screw it and flattened the tornado so it could touch the ground instead. Tornadoes like this give the illusion of being 3-mile-wide monsters, when in reality they are no wider than your classic wedge and are just ridiculously small. The shortest tornado on record was likely one of these
Things.
That isn't to say there aren't good examples of short yet photogenic tornadoes. One of my favorite examples is the famous 1997 Miami, Florida tornado/waterspout. The twister famously swept just north of the skyline before moving out over the Biscayne Bay where it would strike the MacArthur Causeway. Photos taken from high-rises show a surreal scene of a monstrous tube looming over the buildings. And it certainly is monstrous, especially when compared to Miami's then tallest building, the... Oh, look at that. They went back to using their original name. Swell. At 764 feet, the Southeast Financial Center is just barely over half as tall as the Miami Twister. And this really brings out the size of the tornado. Until you take this dinky little office building away and put a real skyscraper in its place. When standing next to the Empire State Building, 1,480 feet begins to feel a little bit more tangible. And once you bring in super tall buildings, well, just forget it. Now, I'm talking relative here, of course. 1,500 feet is certainly tall compared to 6-foot-tall bipedal great apes. But in the world of tornadoes, it is downright puny. Another tornado that is surprisingly short touched down 2 years prior in the Texas Panhandle, the land of magical high-based wonders. This particular tornado is arguably the most famous of the 1995 season, and is responsible for still some of the most incredible tornado footage to date. This, of course, is the 1995 Pampa, Texas tornado. This violent F4 drill bit carved its way through the southern industrial sectors of the city, tossing cars and large chunks of structures hundreds of feet, before moving into the residential center, and eventually dissipating. Despite the tornado's immense power, having effortlessly tossed aside 15-ton pieces of machinery, it was quite small. While the Pampa tornado's path width broke 200 yards, its height was barely twice that at no more than 1,400 feet tall, even shorter than the Miami Twister. The same is true for the other tornadoes in the June 8th outbreak. Pampa was a triplet, sharing the panhandle with 2 other F4s that struck Kellerville and Allison, Texas to the east. Furthermore, the same supercell that birthed the Pampa Twister would drop another tornado near Hoover, Texas shortly after the death of the former. Although generally wider, all 3 of these tornadoes would have had similar heights to Pampa. Now, throughout the video so far, I've covered the sizes of various types of tornadoes from your classic cone to your stout stovepipe. One group of tornadoes, however, has been noticeably absent, and purposefully. In a video about the sizes of various tornadoes, they're probably the ones you clicked on it for. You didn't come for dusty pipes or obscure tubes that just so happen to be twice the height of the Matterhorn, nor did you want to see puny little vortexes that just so happen to be 2 of the most famous tornadoes of the 90s. No. I know what you came here for. So I gotta be blunt with you. The entire reason this video was made stares you dead in the face like a fruit bat in a floodlight when you search for tornado size comparison on YouTube. What you find is a bottomless pit of videos so comically cookie cutter and half-assed that it even prompted Skip Talbot to respond. Other than misleading facts, a gross oversimplification of the enhanced Fujita scale, and the odd inclusion of tropical cyclones, the general trend with these videos is the use of set sprites or particle effects to represent tornadoes. The glaring issue with this is that as each tornado grows in width, it also grows in height, which of course is not correct in the slightest. I mean, just look at Joplin here. If we were to assume this tornado has the correct width of around 1 mile, a tornado of this stature would be in the realm of 5.5 miles tall. Yeah. So now that that's been established, let's look at the real sizes of some large wedges. There's many on the field, so let's start familiar. One of the most infamous large tornadoes in history is 1999's Bridge Creek Moore Monster F5. Only a handful of tornadoes can really rival this thing's reputation. With maximum recorded winds firmly above 300 miles per hour and maximum width of close to 1 mile, Bridge Creek 99 takes a page out of Twister's Guide to Being a Big Scary Son of a
It must be at least a mile wide!
It's the quintessential F5, and the brunt of its fury would be brought down upon large swaths of the southern Oklahoma City metro area, ultimately claiming 36 lives and dealing roughly $1 billion in damage. The May 3rd Twister is the pinnacle of a lineage of ghastly F5s that tore across the American Midwest and South throughout the 1990s. Although Bridge Creek is famous for its power and size, it is more often than not 1997's Gerald, Texas tornado of May 27th that is regarded as the king of damage done, having reduced the Double Creek Estate's housing division to merely a flat plain of dirt. Gerald was an overall smaller tornado than Bridge Creek at around 3/4 of a mile, with a slightly taller condensation funnel at 800 meters to Bridge Creek's 700. Another famed funnel from the decade is 1991's Andover, Kansas tornado, notable for its extensive video coverage, as well as collaborating with the Iraqi government to impede America's aerial refueling capability. It failed. The F5 would begin its life as a lanky trunk as it passed over McConnell Air Force Base before swelling into this quasi-wedge stovepipe thing as it entered Andover. At roughly 1 kilometer in height, it was one of the taller F5s of the decade. However, its less than half-mile width makes it smaller overall than both Gerald and Bridge Creek. After a substantial F5 drought in the early 2000s, the 2007 Greensburg, Kansas tornado would allow the National Weather Service a test run of the highest category on the new enhanced Fujita scale. The Greensburg EF5, shrouded in darkness, plowed through the heart of the city as it swelled to a gigantic 1.7 mile wide width, practically as wide as the Golden Gate Bridge is long. At 1 kilometer in height, the massive wedge completely eclipses the similarly tall Andover Twister, being over 5.5 times wider. As the tornado touched down after dark, however, glimpses of its immense silhouette were only visible through momentary flashes of lightning. Of course, massive size is not exclusive to the churning maelstroms that obtain EF5, and even as the years following 2007 saw one of the most EF5 heavy periods since the mid to late 1970s, the twisters that settled for EF3 and EF4 continuously outdid them. And then we come to late May of 2013. On May 20th, 14 years after the May 3rd tornado, another strong EF5 would slam into southern Oklahoma City through Newcastle and more. Although it had nearly 100 miles per hour slower winds than the Maxi 302 of the 99 twister, it was slightly larger at 1.3 miles in width and 750 meters in height. Keeping with the trend, though, 11 days later, on the 31st, another monster would reach for the Earth. At this point, the 2013 El Reno, Oklahoma tornado needs no introduction. Its titanic 2.6-mile width has been superimposed over Central Park by so many media outlets so many times, it's become redundant. So I won't show you that. Instead, here it is superimposed over Central Park in 3D. El Reno is a difficult beast to properly visualize, and I believe at least in part this is due to the tornado's appearance. Unlike other large wedges, for all of El Reno's life, the twister was either obscured by rain or displayed a partial condensation funnel not representative of the tornado's true size. The large suction vortices orbiting within the tornado don't make the picture any clearer. Exaggerating the debris field gives us a better picture of the tornado's size when comparing it to the likes of Pampa, Dodge City, Dimmitt, Jarrell, Greensburg, and its little brother. Although El Reno is the current king of size, it's difficult to talk about it without mentioning the previous record holder, the far lesser known 2004 Hallam, Nebraska tornado. Although dethroned, Hallam in many respects is still more impressive than El Reno. For starters, at 2.5 miles wide, Hallam is a mere 528 feet slimmer than El Reno, a distance less than 1.5 football fields. At 1 kilometer tall, Hallam is taller, with a slightly larger overall volume inside the funnel, ultimately giving it a more commanding silhouette. Hallam's condensation funnel was significantly more mature, with near complete condensation coverage within the wind field. Hallam was also on the ground longer, with a path length of 54 miles to El Reno's 16. And although not necessarily representative of the tornadoes themselves, Hallam did achieve an F4 rating, whereas El Reno was downgraded to EF3. I will admit, though, that this is a bit of a reach, as the Fujita and EF scales are not directly comparable, and the maximum recorded wind speeds of 296 miles per hour of El Reno are significantly higher than Hallam's estimated 200. At the end of the day, though, most of this is just trivial information. I mean, there's a reason meteorologists and structural engineers spend hours analyzing damage and estimated wind speed instead of huddling around a desk to see what the 1979 Gove County, Kansas tornado looks like next to the Transamerica Pyramid.
No, go past this part. In fact, never play this again.
You'd have to be quite the nerd to do that. Since 2013, there have been thousands more tornadoes, most small, some big, and a couple that are really big. And prior to 2013, there are thousands upon thousands more. But considering I've put you through a good 30 minutes of this already, I think I'll leave their stories for another day. Although, hopefully now, after either wasting an afternoon or destroying your sleep schedule, you have just some sense of just what this is.